Okay. My first choice would be Takashi Ikegami, who's an associate professor at the University of Tokyo in the Department of Arts and Sciences. I love Takashi because he's an interdisciplinary practitioner, and he comes up with the wildest, most amazing philosophies that really make you think. I would also invite Martin Hanzik, who is another associate professor, this time at the Southern University of Denmark in the Department of Physics and Chemistry, the Center for Fundamental Living Technology. Gosh, all these titles. But he invented this programmable model of a cell, so he created the chemistry for that. And then the other person I would invite would be Neil Spiller, who is a visionary architect based at the University of Greenwich. He's Dean of the School of Architecture and Construction here. I'm Rachel Armstrong. I'm a senior lecturer at the University of Greenwich in Research and Enterprise, and I'm co-director of Avatar, and that's the Advanced Virtual and Technological Architectural Research Group. I think immersive technologies in the future in 3D will actually be part of everyday experience. My particular interest is a field of science at the moment which can be thought of as synthetic biology. Now, synthetic biology is a much broader field than many people's equation with the advent of genetic engineering. So synthetic biology simply means design and engineering of living systems. I take a very particular view of this in that I'm using chemistry to create more lifelike systems through the development of materials that respond to ourselves and to the environment in lifelike ways. So, for example, they can grow, they can repair, they can talk to each other, or they respond to each other. Talking is a little bit anthropocentric, but they have a dynamic engagement with their environment in the present, and they have this unique capacity of life, for example, to respond to challenges in the environment in real time, which is an ongoing thing. And that's what machines don't do. They don't have the ongoing connectivity with their surroundings and the capacity, the physical capacity to respond to them. So we're producing a lot of waste at the site of use, which is in buildings. Now, if we made the surfaces of our buildings actually remediate at source some of these toxins that are being produced, maybe, for example, we could trap carbon dioxide and use a metabolism, a particular chemistry that one of these living agents or a biological system can use as a foodstuff to make something else with. So we could use, say, for example, algae. Algae like carbon dioxide and sunlight, and they make biodiesel using those two resources. So if we used algae on the surfaces of our buildings, we could trap carbon dioxide using sunlight and produce biodiesel. And we're looking at designs that could help establish that in a very pleasant, social, cultural and aesthetically pleasing way. And so again, if you think outside the paradigm in which you exist, maybe you come up with innovations that don't currently have a space, but we're opening up some new solution spaces simply by changing the way that we think about technology and what is possible within a technological context. So ultimately then, the synthetic biology, which is a design and engineering engagement with living systems and natural systems, actually becomes part of our natural environment. Because if you think about it, architecture is actually our natural environment, and it's so sterile. Although we bring water and food into these environments, actually we're not living in a green field. We don't live underneath sunshine. We actually live in little caves, little sterile caves. There is a reason why we have constructed buildings like inert shells to be durable and completely resist nature. But I actually think that our future survival depends on changing that relationship and actually connecting our living spaces to the environment. So, for example, the first projects, as I mentioned briefly, would be to pollution monitor, to mop up pollution, to extract those toxins that come from our own metabolism, whether that's just from the waste products that we produce in nitrogenous waste and organic waste, or whether it's a consequence of the machines that we rely on. So I think there's a very intimate relationship to be had that is new between our existence and the technologies around us. And if you think about that, that's actually construction of our world. And so you really can't get more immersive or 3D than actually re-articulating the way that information and material and then ecology become interconnected as a design and engineering project that becomes orchestrated through a whole range of species and maybe different animal kingdoms of technology. The case studies that I think best represent this immersive and 3D kind of technology, I'll start off by saying some of the projects that I'm working on right now, and then incorporate maybe some of the other projects that I've seen around, which I just think are very cool. So I'm developing a paint in collaboration with the University of Glasgow and the University of Southern Denmark, which is a living paint. I mean, it's based on this protocell technology that I'm working with, which are these smart oil droplets, smart chemistries, that have a little metabolism. They have a chemistry that can respond to the presence of carbon dioxide by fixing it, turning it into a solid material, a carbonate, and then removing it from the environment, but then also sensing when the active ingredient is spent and changing colour. So a paint then, for example, that eats carbon dioxide and changes colour when it's full, so you know when to apply it again. The next one is actually, if we think about that on a much greater scale, a project that we've been working on for the last 2 years has been Saving Venice, or Future Venice, where the idea is to use these programmable droplets and fit them with a metabolism, so a chemical reaction that makes them move away from light. So they get charged up by light energy, and they want to find a much less illuminated place to a much lower, to be stable at a more lower energy, and so these droplets will move away from the light and go underneath darkened foundations, where they are fitted with a second metabolism so that they can produce these limestone shells by eating carbon dioxide or absorbing carbon dioxide that's been dissolved in water. And so Venice was an ideal location for this kind of technology. One, because machinic interventions hadn't completely solved the problem of Venice and its sustainability in probably the world's harshest environment, which is on a shoreline, not only on a shoreline but on delta soils on a shoreline. So it's sinking as well as being pounded both physically by the waves and the wind, but also chemically through the deposition of salt crystals as the city gets repeatedly flooded and then desiccated, as the sea level changes. And so no inert permanent structure does very well under those incredibly varying conditions. There is no ideal. And actually, if you look around the city of Venice itself and look into the walls of the lagoons and along the shoreline, you actually see a lot of biology there. You see limpets and mussels and clams and algae and bacteria, and they're all taking a great hold on the side of Venice. And so the idea was actually using artificial cells, or these artificial model cells that we can program to exist in specific locations that are lacking light, and we can direct them to actually sitting underneath the foundations of the city, which are resting on wood piles. In other words, the whole city of Venice is standing on stilettos in soft delta soils. And if we can grow these wood piles so that they can spread the point load and distribute the weight of the city over a much larger area, we now take the stilettos off and put the city on platform boots. And so the idea is then that, responding to the flows of the sea and the natural ecology and the availability of resources, that gradually, following a biological process that's already existing within the city of Venice, that we could actually use that in an engineering context and literally grow an architecture was going to, an infra architecture that gradually then makes itself visible with time in the context of this historic city, a city that really is worth saving because it says so much about the best of human culture, and it's such a romantic, beautiful place. In terms of other projects, I think one of the most beautiful projects I've come across for a while, again a speculative project by artist Doho Soo. He's created a project that started in 2000 called the Bridge Project, A Perfect Home. And that really is Doho Soo's search for identity in an internationalized, globalized world today. And his proposition as an artist who responds to cultural conditions and technological conditions of his time, and being a science fiction fan, was to speculate on the construction of a bridge between Seoul, which is his home, and New York, which is where he was doing a lot of his work in making a lot of sales and art, and how to literally, physically link those two living spaces. And so he came up with the idea of a bridge. I think lots of fantastic metaphorical and poetic kind of resonances with that. But he also wanted to think about it as an engineering project. And he tried some collaborations with civil engineers. And of course they were being very literal about the construction of the bridge, which they were trying to imagine like the Golden Gate Bridge or some mammoth suspension bridge, and they were just saying, well, it's just not going to work. And so Doho came up with some ideas about this bio-bubble bridge, which is literally islands of algae-like frog spawn that would self-assemble according to the geological and kind of weather-based systems. We're talking about geoengineering here. So using geoengineering forces to assemble and direct this bridge in this bottom-up way, based on a bioalgae bubble bridge that literally forms this landmass, a bit like the Giant's Causeway, as far as I can imagine, across the Pacific itself. And so I love this project because, again, it's a new way of thinking. It helps us address some of these notions of scale, and about how we actually build in an age where we understand the environment around us is so incredibly dynamic. Also part of this bridge was to create a new relationship with Japan, because I know that Korea and Japan aren't necessarily bosom buddies. They've got a great respect for each other. But with the recent events in northeast Japan and the Sendai region, and the Fukushima power plants leaking into the local area, then meant that Doho Soo also imagined that part of the foot of this bridge would be remediating. It would also help attenuate the spread of nuclear radiation that's coming from the Fukushima plant. So the idea was that this is not just a functional bridge. It's not even an environmentally healing bridge, but it also says something about human culture, identities. It says something about scale, and of course all the processes that go into the construction of this bridge, this self-assembling, complex, rather fantastical exploration of technology, and then lead to what the ideal home is, this perfect home that gets built, at this speculative halfway point between Seoul and New York. So for me, that's like one of the most imaginative projects, a very powerful and important project.